What would you sacrifice for power? Rose Okocha, the billionaire heiress with beauty and brains, ruled every room she entered until her scandalous past returned to tear her world apart. Betrayed by those closest to her, fighting for her legacy and her family's empire, she must face a new challenge, a stoic bodyguard with a secret of his own. As betrayal and desire collide, will Rose emerge victorious, or will the shadows of her past destroy her forever? The ending will leave you stunned. Don't miss a second of this gripping story. Rose Okocha was more than just stunning, she was mesmerizing. Her presence crackled with an electric intensity, and her beauty wasn't merely a gift, it was a weapon, an armor, and a passport to a life she embraced with reckless abandon. High cheekbones framed her face like a masterpiece, while cascading waves of luxurious black hair tumbled effortlessly over her shoulders. Her eyes, an intoxicating blend of mischief and mystery, ensnared anyone bold enough to meet them, rendering her utterly irresistible. She was a siren who understood the full extent of her power and wielded it unapologetically. Men didn't just look at her, they paused, held their breath, and felt their worlds shift irrevocably. But it wasn't just her looks, it was the way she moved, the way she carried herself with an effortless confidence that teetered on the edge of recklessness. Rose didn't merely enter rooms, she owned them. Every morning, she lounged on her velvet chaise like a queen surveying her kingdom. Sunlight filtered through the sheer drapes of her penthouse, casting a glow over her silk robe, loosely tied, as she scrolled through her phone. Each swipe revealed another admirer, models, athletes, wealthy tycoons, all vying for her attention with bold declarations of desire. She reveled in their adoration. The chase was exhilarating, the control intoxicating. Yet when the game ended and the lights dimmed, she was left with a gnawing emptiness she refused to acknowledge. Rose sought escape in the nightlife. Every club worth mentioning knew her name. She didn't just attend parties, she became the party. She danced with wild abandon, champagne flutes perpetually in hand, always flanked by a rotating cast of admirers. The nights blurred into mornings, and the thrill of it all became her lifeline. One morning, her heels clicked sharply against the marble floors of the Okocha mansion as she stumbled in, laughing, her three companions trailing behind like worshippers. Her father, Chief Emeka Okocha, descended the grand staircase in his robe, his expression thunderous. Woken by the commotion, he had reached his limit. "Out, all of you!" he roared, his commanding voice echoing through the house. The men, startled by the force of his fury, slunk out without protest. Rose, still tipsy, swayed slightly and waved dismissively. "Father, calm down. They were just keeping me company." "Company?" Emeka's voice boomed, each syllable slicing through her drunken haze. "Rose, this is beyond disgraceful. Have you no shame?" By dinner, the alcohol had worn off, but her anger remained. She jabbed her fork into her plate, her glare smoldering across the table. "You can't keep interfering in my life, Father. I need my own place if you're going to act like this." Emeka's steely gaze didn't waver. "This house is more than big enough for the two of us, but this behavior," he said, his tone cutting, "is unacceptable. You're an Okocha. You represent this family. Start acting like it." Days later, the tension still simmering between them, Rose sat across from her father at breakfast when her phone buzzed. She ignored his disapproving glance and answered gleefully, "Kioma, what's the plan for the weekend?" Her friend's voice crackled with excitement. "There's a new guy in town, handsome, rich, and staying at the top hotel. Exclusive party. Trust me, everyone is dying to meet him." Rose smirked. "And if you want him, I can make it happen," Kioma said. "But it'll cost you $20,000. The competition's fierce." "Done. Rose said without hesitation. I'll transfer it now. Across the table, her father's hand froze mid-air, his coffee cup hovering as he stared at her aghast. Did you just pay $20,000 for a man? He asked, his voice a dangerous calm. Rose looked up, unbothered. It's my money. It's not just about the money, Emeka snapped, his cup hitting the table with a loud clink. It's the principle. Is this who you are now? Throwing money at whims, treating people like trophies? Though Rose had a reputation for brilliance in the boardroom, securing lucrative deals and dazzling clients with her charisma, her personal life cast a shadow over her achievements. To Emeka, it was clear his legacy, his empire, was at risk if it fell into the hands of a woman ruled by impulse. The breaking point came when tabloids plastered her face on their covers, linking her with a scandalous actor. Furious, Emeka summoned her to his study that evening. Rose, he began, his voice low, you've made a mockery of this family for the last time. She leaned against his ornate desk, arms crossed, exuding defiance. Oh, spare me the lecture. We've done this dance before. This time, I mean it, he growled. If you want the Okocha group, you'll prove you're capable of discipline and focus. Rose smirked. Discipline? Focus? Let's not pretend there's anyone better suited for the job. Emeka's voice turned icy. You'll abstain from sex for 6 months. No partying, no drinking, no flirting. If you fail, the company goes to the board. Rose's bravado faltered. You're joking. I'm dead serious. And you'll sign a contract. If you break the rules, you lose everything. Her pride refused to let her back down. Fine, she snapped. I'll do it. The next morning, her resolve was tested when a tall, broad-shouldered man stood at the end of the driveway. His black suit emphasized his muscular frame, and his sharp eyes seemed to assess everything at once. Who's that? Rose asked, glaring at her father over breakfast. Meet Chidi, Emeka said with a sly smile. Your new bodyguard. A babysitter? Really? Not a babysitter. A shadow. He'll ensure you stick to the terms of our agreement. Chidi stepped forward, his deep baritone voice unwavering. Miss Okocha, I'm here to ensure your safety and compliance. Rose's eyes narrowed, assessing him. He was annoyingly handsome, with a chiseled jawline and piercing eyes that betrayed nothing. His stoic demeanor irritated her. He wasn't like the men who doted on her, and that only made him more intriguing. She leaned back in her chair, smirking. Hope you're ready for a wild ride, Chidi. His reply was cool and composed. I've handled worse. From that moment, Rose tested his limits. She tried sneaking out, dressing provocatively, and flirting shamelessly, but Chidi remained unyielding. Going somewhere? He'd ask with maddening calm when he caught her. You can't stop me, she pouted one night. I can, and I will, he replied simply. It infuriated her, but deep down, Rose felt something unfamiliar. Respect. For the first time, she'd met someone who didn't bend to her will. And that, in itself, was thrilling. Rose Okocha, the heiress whose beauty was the stuff of legend, was not accustomed to being ignored. Her confidence, an almost tangible force, had always ensured that she got what she wanted. Men fell at her feet, deals were sealed with her charm, and no one ever dared to deny her anything. But now, Chidi, stoic, unshakable Chidi, was proving to be an enigma, and it infuriated her. After yet another failed attempt to sneak out to a party under his watchful eye, Rose stormed to her room and called her best friend, Kioma. This man, she hissed into the phone, he's impossible. He doesn't react, doesn't flinch. I don't think he's even human. Kioma laughed knowingly. Rose, you've just lost your touch. No man can resist a beautiful woman like you. You need to get him on your side. Seduce him, break him. Rose smirked, her pride stung but intrigued by the challenge. Fine. If he wants to act like a stone, I'll carve him into something softer. The next morning, Rose began her campaign. She flirted shamelessly, tossing suggestive comments on his way, leaning a little too close, letting her fingers graze his arm as she passed. Chidi remained infuriatingly calm, his professionalism unwavering. One evening, after another failed attempt to provoke a reaction, she exploded. "Are you a stone, Chidi?" she shouted, her voice echoing through the marble halls. "You don't even move." Chidi, standing with his hands clasped behind his back, simply raised an eyebrow. "If you're finished, Miss Okocha, I'll be outside." Rose clenched her fists, her frustration growing by the day. The monotony of her new life, the endless cycle of restraint and rules, was wearing her down. It was time to use the one tool she trusted above all else, her charm. That evening, as Chidi stood by the pool, Rose stepped out in a silk robe that hugged her curves like a second skin. She walked toward him, holding an envelope thick with cash. Her lips curved into a seductive smile. "Chidi," she purred. "Why don't you take a little vacation?" "No one has to know." Chidi barely glanced at the envelope. "Miss Okocha, I'm not here for the money." "Everyone has a price," she teased, stepping closer, her voice a velvet whisper. "Not me," he said, his tone firm, his posture unyielding, but Rose noticed the faintest twitch in his jaw, a subtle sign that her presence wasn't as meaningless to him as he pretended. The realization sent a thrill through her, even as it frustrated her further. Weeks passed, and Rose found herself struggling with emotions she didn't fully understand. Alone with her thoughts, she began questioning the choices that had brought her here. Memories of her mother, who had left when Rose was just a child, surfaced unbidden. She realized that her wild lifestyle, her need for validation, was her way of filling the void her mother had left behind. And then there was Chidi. His calm demeanor and quiet strength were unlike anything she'd ever encountered. He wasn't just a challenge, he was a mirror, forcing her to confront parts of herself she had long ignored. She hated to admit it, but she respected him, and that respect was slowly evolving into something deeper. Halfway through the challenge, Rose experienced a moment of piercing clarity. This journey wasn't about appeasing her father or meeting his expectations. It was about proving something far greater to herself. Could she rise above the chaotic impulses that had defined her? Or was she destined to be a prisoner of them? That realization ignited a spark of determination she hadn't felt before. It was time to channel her energy into something meaningful, something lasting. With a renewed focus, Rose threw herself into the family business. Each morning, she strode into the Okocha group headquarters with confidence that surprised even her. Instead of avoiding the intricacies of the empire her father had built, she embraced them. She shadowed executives, pored over dense reports, and immersed herself in strategy sessions. Hours bled into days, and the more she learned, the more her natural aptitude for leadership shone through. To her surprise, and to everyone else's, she excelled. By the end of one particularly grueling day, Rose finally returned home. The grand entrance of the family estate greeted her with its usual opulence, but she felt none of the ease she used to associate with it. Her heels clicked faintly against the marble floor as she made her way inside, exhaustion weighing on her every step. She dropped her bag with a sigh, loosening the tension in her shoulders. As she looked up, her eyes met Chidi's. He stood in the foyer, his posture as steady and composed as ever, his dark eyes watching her. But something was different tonight. A faint smile tugged at his lips, a small yet unmistakable break in his otherwise stoic demeanor. It was rare, almost disarming, and it sent an unexpected flutter through her chest. "You're doing well," he said simply, his voice low and even, as though he hadn't just sent her pulse racing. Coming from Chidi, those words meant something. Her lips curved into a tired but genuine smile. "Coming from you, that's high praise," she replied, her tone light, though the gratitude in her eyes betrayed her deeper feelings. For a moment, the tension of the day melted away. Chidi's gaze held no judgment, no trace of expectation, only a quiet acknowledgement of the effort she had poured into her transformation. It wasn't a grand gesture, just a fleeting moment shared in silence, but it stayed with Rose long after she climbed the stairs to her room. It wasn't just his rare smile that lingered in her thoughts. It was the realization that someone had finally seen her for who she was becoming, not for the mistakes of her past. But life had a way of testing even the strongest resolve when the present felt too steady. Days later, at a glittering charity gala packed with Lagos's elite, Rose's confidence faltered. The steady progress she had been building felt suddenly fragile as her eyes caught a figure weaving through the crowd. Thierry, the international model and former lover from Paris, moved toward her with that same intoxicating magnetism that had once drawn her in so effortlessly. His perfectly tailored suit and confident stride felt like a whisper from her past, a reminder of the woman she used to be, the one who lived for attention and abandoned discipline for the thrill of the moment. "Rose," Thierry greeted her, his deep, accented voice dripping with charm. "It's been too long. I missed you." His words wrapped around her like a familiar melody, stirring something she couldn't quite place. Before she could muster a response, a solid presence materialized at her side. Chidi, his towering figure effortlessly cut through the tension, his silent authority radiating a protective energy that seemed to pull Rose out of the quicksand of her past. Thierry hesitated, his charm flickering under Chidi's unyielding gaze. The contrast between the two men was striking. One, a reminder of chaos, the other a symbol of stability and quiet strength. Rose glanced between them, her heart racing. In Thierry's flirtatious smile, she saw the allure of the reckless indulgence that had once defined her, but in Chidi's steady presence, she saw the woman she was striving to become, disciplined, grounded, and in control of her own story. This was no longer about proving herself to her father. It was about proving to herself and to the world that she was stronger than the whispers, the scandals, and the temptations of her past. Thierry might have represented who she was, but Chidi embodied the life she wanted. As the evening unfolded, Rose felt the weight of the choice before her. Would she rise above and claim the legacy she had worked so hard to rebuild? Or would she let the past unravel everything she had fought to achieve? The night at the gala wasn't the end of Rose's story. It was the beginning of the ultimate test, a moment where the lines between the past and present blurred, and the woman she was becoming would have to make a decision that would define her future. Her journey was far from over. The next chapter was waiting, and it promised challenges, heartbreak, and triumphs that would push her to her limits. The resolve that night carried her through the days that followed, but the weight of the challenge pressed harder with each passing week. Rose was tired of the scrutiny, of Chidi's constant watchfulness, of the cage her father's ultimatum had created. One night, she decided to break free. Disguised in sunglasses and a baseball cap, Rose slipped out of the estate unnoticed. The thrill of rebellion was intoxicating as she drove to an exclusive club, but it didn't last. The moment she stepped out of her car, a familiar voice stopped her cold. "Going somewhere, Miss Okocha?" Chidi's tone was calm, but his arms crossed over his chest told her he wasn't amused. Rose groaned, spinning to face him. "Do you ever sleep?" she snapped, trying to mask her embarrassment. "It's my job not to," he replied, his voice even. For a moment she studied him, frustration bubbling beneath her cool facade. "You really don't crack, do you?" she asked, half in irritation, half in admiration. "Not when it comes to you," Chidi said, his steady gaze meeting hers. There was no trace of mockery in his words, only something genuine that caught her off guard. Rose didn't know how to respond. In his unwavering dedication, she saw something she didn't think she deserved: care. It left her unnerved and, oddly, comforted. As the weeks turned into months, the dynamic between them began to shift. Her attempts to rattle Chidi's composure turned into late-night conversations by the pool, where the stillness of the water mirrored the quiet vulnerability that emerged between them. For the first time, Rose opened up about the wounds she had buried. The ache of her mother's abandonment, the loneliness that had driven her to seek fleeting validation in dangerous ways. Chidi listened without judgment, his words offering clarity when hers faltered. "Discipline isn't about denying yourself joy," he said one evening. "It's about controlling what you desire, so it doesn't control you." His words stayed with her, their weight sinking deep into the places she had tried to ignore. Slowly, Rose began to confront the roots of her impulses. What she had once dismissed as meaningless pleasure now felt like a mask, one that had hidden her pain for too long. The transformation was gradual but undeniable. Her growth became a topic of whispered curiosity among her peers, but the tabloids, ever hungry for scandal, refused to let her evolve quietly. Rumors swirled about the mysterious shadow who was always by her side. Friends from her old life, sensing her drift away from the woman they once knew, tried to pull her back. Tasha, one of her closest confidants from her wild years, invited her to a private yacht party. Rose hesitated but eventually agreed, determined to prove she could still enjoy herself without losing control. Chidi accompanied her, his silent presence a reminder of her newfound restraint. The party was a whirlwind of temptation. Champagne flowed freely, the music pulsed with seductive energy, and men circled Rose like moths to a flame. But when the advances came, Rose surprised them all by declining. "You've changed," Tasha said, her tone more accusatory than admiring. "Maybe it's time I did," Rose replied, her voice steady. She glanced at Chidi, who stood a few feet away, his watchful gaze giving her strength. For the first time, she realized that the validation she had craved didn't come from others, it came from within. Just as Rose began to feel the steady foundation of her transformation, a storm brewed within her father's company. A jealous rival, threatened by her growing competence and poised ascent, orchestrated a betrayal that struck at the heart of her progress. Leaked to the press were fabricated stories, salacious lies painting her as irresponsible, reckless, and unfit to lead the Okocha group. The headlines were merciless, splashed across every major publication, each one more damning than the last. For Rose, it felt like a cruel echo of the past she had fought so hard to leave behind. The world seemed determined to define her by the woman she used to be, rather than the one she was becoming. It was a test of resolve unlike any she had faced before, threatening to unravel everything she had worked tirelessly to rebuild. As Rose stood in front of the boardroom, the sharp buzz of whispers behind closed doors threatened to shake her resolve. Betrayal had a way of striking at the most inconvenient times, and this was no different. The fabricated stories leaked by her rival had spread like wildfire, painting her as reckless and unfit to lead. It wasn't just her career on the line, it was the legacy of the Okocha name. But Rose was no longer the woman who hid behind glamour and distractions. She had fought too hard to let this setback define her. Chidi had been the one to pull her from the edge when the rumors first surfaced. "You've come this far," he had told her, his voice steady. "Don't let lies undo what you've built." His belief in her had lit a fire. Together, they had meticulously gathered evidence, piece by piece exposing her rival's deceit. It was grueling, exhausting work. But when the truth finally came to light, Rose didn't feel triumph. She felt something far more profound, clarity. The experience had tested her resilience and sharpened her determination to rise above. Through it all, Chidi had remained her anchor. He wasn't just her protector anymore. He was the one person who saw her potential even when she doubted herself. As she stood victorious in front of the board, her father's quiet approval meant everything. Chief Emeka Okocha had been watching his daughter's transformation with growing admiration. The woman before him now was a far cry from the carefree heiress he had once feared would squander her inheritance. Her sharp focus and unwavering resolve made him proud, but he knew she still had more to learn. "You've surprised me, Rose," he said as they shared a quiet moment in his office. His voice carried the weight of respect. But leadership isn't just about success. It's about resilience and wisdom. The world outside won't always be fair. It will test you in ways you can't imagine. Rose leaned forward, meeting his gaze with newfound confidence. "And I'm proving I can handle that, aren't I?" "You are," he admitted. But there was a glint in his eye that made her uneasy, as if he had another test waiting for her. Days later, that test arrived in the form of a multi-million-dollar deal teetering on collapse. A prominent client, swayed by lingering whispers about her past, threatened to pull out. The familiar sting of doubt clawed at her, but she wasn't the same woman who would have crumbled under pressure. Chidi was by her side, his calm presence grounding her. "You can fix this," he said. "Prove to them that you're more than the headlines." Drawing strength from his words, Rose arranged a meeting with the client. Her pitch was flawless, her demeanor both poised and magnetic. By the time she walked out of the room, not only had she salvaged the deal, but she had gained the client's respect. "That was impressive," Chidi said later that night as they left the office. Rose smiled, pride flickering in her expression. "I'm starting to impress myself." But it wasn't just her professional life evolving. Her feelings for Chidi were becoming impossible to ignore. His quiet strength and unwavering loyalty had grown into a steady comfort, but now it was more than that. She found herself drawn to him in ways she couldn't explain, ways that left her conflicted. One evening, as they walked through the estate gardens, Rose couldn't resist teasing him. "Do you ever get tired of babysitting me?" "You're not a baby," he replied, his tone softer than usual. "You're a woman who's proving everyone wrong." The vulnerability in his voice caught her off guard. The air between them crackled with unspoken words, but neither dared to take the first step. Her father, however, seemed to sense the shift. Calling them both into his office, Chief Okocha made an unexpected announcement. "If you finish this challenge, Rose, I'll name you CEO immediately, no strings attached, but I want to know if you've learned the most important lesson." "And what's that?" Rose asked, intrigued. "That love isn't a distraction, it's a foundation." The words landed with the force of a thunderbolt. Her father's pointed glance at Chidi didn't go unnoticed, and for the first time, Rose wondered if her father had seen the feelings she was only beginning to understand. As the 6-month challenge neared its end, Rose attended a high-profile gala representing the Okocha group. Eligible bachelors surrounded her, their attention blatant. A wealthy prince, charming and magnetic, singled her out with compliments and promises to whisk her away to his kingdom. 6 months ago, she might have fallen for it. But as she glanced at Chidi, standing stoically nearby, her choice was clear. "Thank you, but I'm not interested," she said, her voice firm yet polite. Chidi's expression didn't change, but she caught the faintest flicker of approval in his eyes. When the challenge finally ended, Rose stood before the board, her father's pride shining through his words as he named her the new CEO. As she delivered her acceptance speech, her gaze found Chidi across the room. The gratitude she felt for him was overwhelming, but it was more than gratitude. After the ceremony, she found him waiting by the car. "You've done it," he said simply. "No," she replied, stepping closer. "We did it." For the first time, Chidi allowed himself to smile, a real one. It was the beginning of something neither of them could deny. Their journey didn't end there. As CEO, Rose faced crisis after crisis, from smear campaigns to corporate rivals. Through it all, Chidi remained by her side, his quiet strength constant, but the bond between them deepened with each passing day, and Rose knew that her greatest victory wasn't winning the challenge or earning her father's respect. It was finding herself and the man who had believed in her all along. Thank you for watching and diving into this journey with us. Be sure to catch the next episode, and if this story moved you, share your thoughts in the comments, and subscribe for more captivating African tales. Don't forget to tap the notification bell to stay inspired and connected to the wisdom and heart of these stories. Until next time, stay blessed and keep shining.